Hello and welcome to Nihel's Notes. This episode features Margarita Leonova, who founded Translated Selves. Translated Selves is a community of multilingual poets and writers that is growing way beyond her wildest dreams. We talked about her journey starting this page, and we dug deep and discussed terms like an Inbetweener and a linguistic shadow. Overall, it was a thoroughly inspiring conversation, and I really hope you enjoy it. Okay, so we were just talking earlier about how you are just finding your way in this world and you are creating this thing that became bigger than your mission and your idea
Yep.
for it. It just grew kind of out of control. You have this page.
Yeah.
You started with Translated Self, correct?
Um, well, yeah, I started with my own bilingual profile, and then I kind of felt that need to justify why it was bilingual. I wanted to explain to people that it's not a distraction to your readers that you're writing in two languages if you make it, clear and understandable and relatable. And through this process of justifying why my page was bilingual, I figured that there were so many other multilingual and bilingual writers out there. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, okay, there's so many others. And most of them were unsure about having, like a bilingual profile because they thought no one is interested in it. And that's how I felt like I wanted to inspire them to do that. If this is who they are, and if writing in two or more languages is what their art consists of, they should not be taken aback just because there's an expectation, let's say on Instagram, about the number of languages you write in. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a pretty big breakthrough you had
Yeah.
to kind of tell the world and yourself that you don't have to be constrained to one language. How did that moment come to you? Like,
All right. So, mm, well, it was actually a very long journey for me. It started at the end of 2016, if you don't mind me jumping so
no,
back in
I
time.
don't.
Right. So I wrote poetry and like short stories since I was really young, maybe like 10 years old. And when I moved abroad, uh, I was I was 19, 2012. I kind of stopped writing because in Singapore English is the official language, and I was like, how am I going to write in English? My English is not good enough. And I started studying psychology. So I studied psychology for 4 years, and at the end of 2016, I felt like I was going nowhere. Even though I enjoyed psychology a lot, and always wanted to do something that will contribute to the society.
Hmm.
I felt like uh, I was doing something that I'm not meant to do.
Hmm.
And I had this moment when I just cut my hair short in front of the mirror. I took my backpack and I just went backpacking for a year. And during that year, I wrote so much, and I wrote in English. So I started leading a
Mm.
diary. And during that year, I improved my English a lot. I learned to express myself, express how I felt. And what really surprised me was that um, I learned more about myself since you see Russian is more of my soul language.
Mm.
It's a language that I grew up with, and English is my rational language. It's a language that I learned. It's my practical language. So expressing my feelings in English came more natural to me, since I guess I didn't feel that connected to the language as I am to Russian. So sometimes when I translate what I write in English into Russian, I get really shy or even maybe embarrassed a little bit. Um,
Wow, that's so
yeah,
fascinating.
it is so interesting. I know, and I actually posted a video about this on Instagram, and so many people texted me saying that um, they can relate. They were like, oh my God, this is how I feel as well. When I write in English, I'm not shy to express my own feelings, but I would never be able to write this in my native language.
Wow. I wonder if,
Just
therapists can use that because, maybe you can express yourself better in a foreign language, and
yeah,
it can be
absolutely.
like the bridge to your soul, like you're saying. It's very interesting.
Yeah, that is so interesting. I started in, I started to lead a diary in English, and by the end of, I wrote so much during my travels that by the end of 2017, I had around 300 poems, both
Wow.
in English and Russian, and I also had around 20 to 25,000 words in my diary. It was all in English. And I looked at it and I was like, what am I going to do with this now? And I remember I contacted my parents. They were supportive all the way, but they were also very worried because, you know, I made such a huge change, just like in a couple of months I made this decision to go backpacking, and I started to write my book. And I contacted them and I said, I don't think I want to study psychology anymore. And they were like, what are you going to study? And I was like, I think I want to be a writer. And the funny thing is that I don't think ever, I would have ever considered myself a writer if not relocation. Because to me, writing is not about, it's not even about how you write, but what you write. And if you have a certain thing to say to the world, um, then your writing goes to like a next level. And imagine if I would never, move abroad, then I would be writing in Russian, right? And
Hmm.
let's say my writing is okay. Um, but there isn't any philosophy that I'm trying to bring to the world. But when I write in English as a Russian person, everything switches. I suddenly have a certain mission. I have a philosophy. I have a certain responsibility, I guess. I feel a certain responsibility. Um, and yeah, I'm really glad that I moved abroad because now I know why I need to write. As I mentioned before, I want to build this like a poetic, you can say, breach
Hmm.
between Russia and the international world. Um, and just like one of my favorite writers, Solzhenitsyn, who, when he was receiving his Nobel Prize, right, he stood there and he said, I don't stand here as a person, I stand here as a whole country. Well, this is not
Wow.
like the exact quote, of course.
Wow, you did
Uh,
great. No, that's great.
yeah, but that's what he meant. Um, Solzhenitsyn spent many years in labor camps, and he made it out there, and he wrote books, on that topic, really heavy books. And he wasn't the master of the word.
Mm-hmm.
It was about how he wrote. It was about what he wrote.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what definitely inspires me. If I read, let's say if I explore a work of a writer or of a poet, I always pay attention to what's their philosophy, what's their mission, what are they trying to bring to the world, and how are they contributing, So back then, Solzhenitsyn contributed in a sense that he spoke the truth. He was not afraid to say what was happening, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
he was also contributing to this breach between Russia and the world at that time. And yeah, nowadays, um, I want to kind of work in the same direction that he did, I guess. So that's why when I started my Instagram profile, the main goal was to build this bridge I did not plan to make a community for other bilingual or multilingual writers, but the whole shift happened in just 3 days, I think. I posted a couple of my first poems, and also this I have this like introduction video in my
Yes.
in my saved stories, and
Yes.
then I explain why I have a bilingual profile, that it is a part of my art, and yeah, it's like you can't take it away because this is who I am, and my English writing is influenced by my Russian language and the other way around. And yeah, after a couple of posts, people started to react. They were like, "Oh, I'm also a bilingual writer. Oh, but I'm so worried. Like I'm afraid to have a bilingual profile and blah blah blah." I figured that they want to do this, but they don't have a platform to do this, and they are not confident enough to, I guess, create their own platform, right? Like their own profile. And so I started posting more and more on this topic on my own profile. And after, I think, 3 weeks, I also started to, make this like a list of all the bilingual or multilingual writers that I found. So
Mm-hmm.
I was already, I guess, I did not realize that I was already trying to build a community, but like I made that list of poets, and I didn't know what to do with it. I just felt like it was the right thing to do. It's
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I felt like someone just like pushed me into that direction. And then one of the girls, she texted me saying like, "Oh, we should have a group chat." And I was like, "Oh yeah, maybe we should have a group chat." So I made like a Facebook group chat, and everyone got to know each other. They introduced themselves. They spoke of the languages that they write in, and that's when I knew that we need our own platform. Like we need translated selves. And yeah, since then it's just started like it grows really quickly. Sometimes I feel like it's just getting out of control. um but I try to keep up with it, and I try to give as much as I can. For now it's just like inspiration to other writers and poets, mostly poets actually. But I plan to create one more page, and it's going to be like translated selves theory or tips. I haven't come up with a name yet, where I will
Okay.
post videos on poetry translation so I can help them out. Like in my stories right now, I post a lot of like polls or questions where I ask them, what is the main reason you don't translate your poetry, or
Mm-hmm.
why are you shy to write in your second language? And then they give me answers so that I can kind of see uh, what is it that they need, and I can provide it to them. So this is the thing I really want to do, because well, you see, inspiring is one thing, but practical help is,
Yes.
yes, it's completely different. It's another
You're
story.
you're 100% providing value to your community. You've not only created this community that supports each other, but you're empowering them by
Yeah,
giving them tools to become better writers and
yeah,
to, pass through the fear that they have
absolutely.
from
Yeah,
writing. That's
yeah,
amazing. And I think you have something to offer even to people who are just bilingual, not bilingual writers, because that's where I'm
yeah.
from. I'm actually, English was my third language.
Oh wow.
Yeah, but English is my strongest language.
Right.
English
Because
is,
it's your
I'm more
everyday language.
connected.
Yeah,
What were you going to say?
because it's your everyday language.
Yes, and I was
Yeah,
educated in this language. Like,
yeah,
I'm going to university studying this language. I read most books in this language.
right.
But what you've ignited and inspired into me, and you've connected to a part of me that
Oh,
I have another soul and I have another soul and personality and
yes,
dimension, if you will
yes,
say, in the other languages that
yeah,
I speak. And maybe I'm not
absolutely.
fluent in them, maybe I don't write in them, but I have part of my
Yes,
soul is
yeah, absolutely.
inside them. And I think that means so much. That opens your world as a person, as an artist.
Yep.
It
No,
opens up your mind.
yeah, you're so right. Because even if you don't practice a certain language, but you know a bit of it. You see, usually culture comprises of like 90% of culture is basically language. So when you
Hmm.
learn a language, you acquire this cultural understanding, right? And even if you don't practice the other languages that much, you still have this like linguistic shadow in everything you say, in everything you do, and especially in everything you think. So that's why it is so good to stay connected to other languages, even if there's one that is predominant or one that you use every day, and obviously it's practical. You make this kind of like decision, because that's
Hmm.
what I did when I moved abroad 2012. I really needed to improve my English. I knew it.
Yes.
I just stopped reading, writing, googling in Russian. I just completely immersed myself, in English language. But after 4 or 5 years, maybe, when I felt like, okay, now I feel comfortable with this, with English language, I was like, I really miss Russian, So
Yeah.
there was this a moment of disconnect, I guess, from my Russian side, but it was still like it's always there. And I think it's so important to accept that part of you, right? Because a lot of people that move abroad, sometimes they really try to deny that previous self of them,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Because they
Hmm.
want to yeah, they want to belong in a new culture. But I think that not belonging 100% is completely fine. The thing is that with people who move abroad, right, they become this kind of in-betweeners. They don't really
Yes.
belong with their culture anymore,
Right.
but they also will never be 100% like natives, I guess, in the country
Yes.
where they moved to. And that is completely fine. In fact, I see it as a strength, because the more perspectives you have, right, the the deeper understanding you are to achieve on a certain
Yes.
topic that you're
Yes.
gonna dig in. Yep. So that's why I believe that I was able to figure out so many things about like bilingual writing, because I am a bilingual writer myself. If I were to just write in one language, I would never be able to, start this whole thing, and especially like inspire people, or just like make them interested, in what I do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm so thankful to be who I am, and have this like two cultures in me. I just love it.
It's so great. And I think I was snapping my fingers and like holding back from just being like, yes, because to not interrupt you, because I
Yeah.
resonated with you so much, because I feel like I have a foot in between
Yeah.
two worlds. In fact, I wrote a bit of a poem that's not finished, but it's something along
Okay.
the line of, I don't walk on soil.
Uh-huh.
I move I move soil underneath me. Like I bring my own soil, and my own soil is this,
Wow.
like it's that concept that's kind of still a rough concept, but it speaks to the part of me that feels like I don't belong on this land,
Yes.
and it's not mine. And in fact, my land is a mixture of these other cultures that is always with me, and it moves wherever I go, and I can't get rid of it, and I can't
Yeah.
be still on the land that I live in. And I know
Yeah.
so many people feel that way.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and it, it it's so interesting that it has so much to do with language, because language is, I love this quote by Emerson, and it's something along the lines of, a man is only half himself, the other half is his expression.
Wow. Yes, that is so true. Yeah, I
And
agree.
language shapes yourself,
Yeah.
so when we have two different languages or two different cultures that we come from and maybe lost, we lose part of ourselves. And I think as humans, we try to condense, we try to like
Mm.
categorize, we try to,
Yep. Absolutely.
everything belongs its own box. And I think a lot of the anxiety or the self confusion people have is from being this global community where we don't just live in the houses that we were born in, we travel. And
Yep.
we need to have a more fluid idea of our identity and be
Yeah.
okay with it. Like you were saying, it's okay to, be in between
Yeah.
two worlds, and it's actually a strength. And I 100% agree with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if you try to deny the part of you, um, yeah, you will most probably lose yourself even more.
Yes.
Just like accept everything about you and try to, try to build it into a strength. Well, it already is, but obviously, if you keep denying a certain aspect, it becomes a weakness. So you see, if you try to
Wow.
deny your cultural belonging, right? Um, every other people around you will notice that, will feel that, and they might even make fun of it. Let's say, I mean, that's true, it happens. And but if you carry it as a strength, you know
Yes.
people will see it as a strength. So it's all
100%.
about, how you project it. It's all about how you project it. And that's why when I started this whole bilingual thing, um there's a quote again, by Solzhenitsyn. He said that talent is always conscious of its own abundance and
Mm.
does not object to sharing. So when I started my profile, I did realize that there weren't a lot of other, bilingual writers out there in Instagram. And some of my friends, they were like, "Oh yeah, you should promote yourself. It's a new thing. It's a different thing." But what I wanted to do was to inspire others to do the same. I didn't
Mm.
feel this need to stand out. In fact, the only reason why I would need to stand out is to just get attention, right? So that I can tell people that they should be themselves, and especially
Yeah.
if they're writing. Because you know let's say a person is writing a poem in English, but their native language is something different. And if they could try and incorporate that cultural belonging they have into this English version, then they they develop their own voice, as a
Hmm.
writer. Like I said, they develop their own voice, or there's something they try to convey to the world. Like in my poetry, there's a lot of mentioning of like my Russian identity, Russian self. And that the book that I'm working on, it's actually um I guess it is about cultural belonging as well.
Mm.
Like it tells my own story, starting from the moment I've moved abroad and until now. And it's all in poetry. Like it's a poetry.
Mm.
Yeah, so it's just my story, but not because I want to talk about myself, but because I want to show people that it's okay to be who you are. It's okay to be who you are. Yeah, and even if you move abroad and it feels like you're not here, not there, that's also okay.
Yeah.
Because in between is also a place. Nowhere is,
Wow.
you
Oh,
know.
that's so good. In between is also a place. I love that.
Thing.
I really love that. You definitely have this bubbling, like it's bubbling out of you, this message. You can't contain it. And I
I
think
guess
that's beautiful, and it's empowering. It's really empowering. And I think it also speaks to people who are, you know, desperate and desiring to study another culture and to
mm,
embrace itself, because some people are, a lot of my friends, like English is their only language,
yep.
and they are heartbroken about it, and they wish that they could speak another language and understand another culture. And I think you're speaking to them too. Maybe you don't know it yet, but I think you have something to tell them. You have something to tell them by your story of how you learned English, and how
Yeah.
the way you learned it, you started thinking in English and all of that. And then you've, you know, explored yourself, your personality, your soul in another culture. And the manifestation of that has been so rewarding. And I think that story is inspiring to new,
Yeah.
to just one. just single speakers. Like, I don't know what the term is.
Yeah, no, I get you. Absolutely. You're right. And in fact, there were already a couple of people that reached out to me and they said that their first language is English, but they want to write in French, for instance, or in Spanish. So yeah, I that's not what I expected, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it happened, and I was like, oh, that's amazing. Yeah, you should definitely do that. But obviously, the biggest fear that people have is to, make mistakes. And I always ask them, what's the main purpose of language? And they're like taken aback. And then I
I'm
say
taken
it's
aback. That's a good
yeah.
one.
So the main purpose is to communicate your own thoughts. So if you are able to express what you think and the other person understands you, you're already speaking the language, right? You're getting your message
Hmm.
across. It is not about being perfect. In fact, it is not only to do with language, with everything, in
Yes.
life.
Yes.
Yeah. So of course, when I speak, English, I'm aware that I can make mistakes here and there, but this is not the point at all. And I've learned to ignore this little voice inside of me that always says, you're gonna make a mistake. Oh no, English, like we all have this like little voice that you just need to kick out of your system, or at least like I always go like, shh, it doesn't matter, because there's something bigger than perfect grammar that I'm trying to convey, when I talk. And yeah, it's the message. So when I started writing, uh, well, yeah, when I started writing, my English it sucked even more than it sucks right now.
Your English is great. I wish I could speak
uh,
so many other languages at the level of proficiency you speak in English. It's really, really good.
Thank you. And the funny thing is that this confidence in language came learned not when I yeah, like it didn't come from practicing grammar, let's say. It came from this realization that I don't have to speak perfect English. I just need to speak my mind, and that's it. Yeah, that's what I tell people. You just start somewhere. You don't have to start posting your poetry straight away in a second or a third language. Just take some time to practice, but you need to start somewhere, because if you keep on being afraid to take this first step, you might never move at all. And
Yes.
that's the real scary thing, uh, I believe that if you keep on moving and you try things, you can never really fail, because you are growing as an individual. But if you stay still, maybe that's a real failure, um, so yeah, it's definitely about just yeah, just taking the first step.
I agree with you. And I'm um fully aware of like my perfectionism and how it holds me back in so many things in my life. And it took me a long time to find the courage to even start a podcast or
Yeah.
to, write in poetry. And I've performed poetry on stage and it was terrifying and all these things. Like, I have good days and I have bad days, but now I feel like I'm much better. How did you like transition from that point that is too afraid to share, too worried about being perfect? Like, what were the steps? What do you think happened to
Yeah.
you? And you could like, give as a story for inspiration, and hope to those of you
Yeah.
who are listening, who are wanting to become a more confident artist that is not afraid of perfectionism.
Yeah. Well, I think it. I think usually this process is quite um. Okay, so I think it usually goes for most of people like this. First, you start practicing something in private, right? I wrote for myself. Then
Yes.
you start sharing with people that your family, your friends, boyfriends, girlfriends, or whatever, right? People that are close to you. And then they give you the encouragement. So you start you feel confident enough to bring it into like into the big world. And I feel like it happens to most people. This happens to most people, and there isn't like a specific there isn't a trick to that. I think it's always this way. First you practice it in private, then you share it to your close ones, and they support you, and then you share to a bigger amount of people. So yeah, I wouldn't, because you see people are always looking for this like perfect um yeah, like for a trick or for a secret way to
Yes,
achieve
yes,
things, and that's not how it works. And it's actually surprising how alike we all are. Our human nature is so universal.
right,
So
right.
I feel like this is how it happens, for the majority of people, and that's how it happened for me as well. I led this diary. I wrote my poems. I kind of kept it to myself. In fact, when I went traveling, I deleted my social media, like Instagram and Facebook. I was so against social media at some point in my life because I just needed my space. I needed to
Yes.
figure out who I am and what I want to do. And that's when I became active on Instagram. Everyone was like, "What? You on Instagram?" It happened in October last year. That's when I really started to lead my Instagram page. And if not my brother, I would not be here right now. It was him who contacted me. He was like, "Okay, that's enough."
Wow.
He was like, "Okay, that's enough. You literally spend 6 to 8 hours a day writing," which is true. It's like I'm addicted to writing. And he was like, "And there's so many thoughts you have, so many ideas you have, and you just keep sitting in your room and you're practicing, which is cool, but you need to get out there and just maybe there's something that that others might want to hear." And
And you do. He was so right. Good
yeah,
job, big brother.
he was so right. I mean, I'm so blessed to have him and like my family, my parents. They always um they always believed in me, and cuz yeah, they always believed in me, and they keep telling me that I just need to share my voice and my thoughts, because you see, I can talk about writing for hours.
Yes.
And I think because they just cannot take it anymore.
Yes.
Like they were like, maybe you should get out there and talk to other people about this, because you just, yeah, you just overloaded with, like, yeah, there's so much energy that I have within me right now. That's why I just want to keep on like expanding in this area of like translated selves. Then also I want to start providing tips on, poetry translation. There is another page that I'm planning to start, which is going to be Translated Selves Russia, and it will be my translation of contemporary poets on Instagram, Russian poets. Um, then maybe like just other popular poets in Russia at the moment, because this is what I was planning at the very beginning, right?
Yes.
Building this bridge, and I was kind of I drifted away a little bit, because you see, I'm not even surprised that I drifted away a little bit. I always say that in-betweeners relate to in-betweeners.
Mm.
It's like,
Hmm.
after I moved abroad, I don't relate as much to, let's say, Russian youth that
Yes.
still lives in Russia, as much as I belong to others who speak several languages. you know so it's just my crowd. I'm not surprised that I just love it. I love to be one of them, and I can understand how they feel. It's like a new culture. The in-betweeners is the new culture, and we just get each other, even though
It is.
we come from different cultural backgrounds. We just get each other. So yeah, so I
And
kind of
oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
oh, no, that's it
Oh,
actually.
okay. I was gonna ask you, in-betweeners is such a good word. Where did you get that concept from?
uh I think I just kind of came up with it.
Amazing.
Like,
It's such a
yeah.
true, it's such a true, I'm gonna use that from now on. I mean,
Nice.
I'm an in-betweener, and you're right. I'm attracted in my life to some sort of in-betweener,
Yeah.
because it's just interesting. I don't know exactly why, but I know that it happens and it's something I'm deeply connected to. And I wanted to ask you,
Yeah.
Why do you think that translation is kind of attracted to the poetry aspect of writing and creativity? I have a theory, but I want to hear yours. Why is poetry so deeply intertwined with this concept of translation and like poetry?
All right. Um, you see, I never thought of this because the reason why I started on this like poetry translation wasn't because I thought that translation and poetry are somewhat more related
Mm-hmm.
than any other type of translation. It was, as I said, a part of me. You know that I believe that there are like different parts of us, right? Like it's the different cultural belongings, languages, different interests, and that's what this is who I am, literally. One part of me loves poetry, another part of me is involved in translation since I write in two languages, which
Mm-hmm.
also makes me a bilingual writer.
Mm-hmm.
So this whole concept is not a certain theory, it is just an extension of who I am. So that's why I feel so, yeah, that's why I feel so connected to it, because this is literally, this is who I am. And building this community is just finding people who are like me so that I can relate to them and I can be, a part of this thing that I could call home, I guess. Since
Yes,
yeah,
a tribe, a community.
yeah,
Yeah. I felt like I was thinking like poetry is it's a beautiful and nuanced art. It's
mm-hmm,
taking what I consider the invisible and making it real. You know,
yeah, absolutely,
they take, and I feel like language, does the same thing. In its nature, it's taking something invisible, something you see, something you
yeah,
feel, something you can't see, and it's translating it into form. Like the art of communication
yeah,
is,
like, mm-hmm,
and I think poetry in itself is the highest form of communication because the whole goal of poetry is to take something that is complex and invisible and not seen and felt very easily, but translated beautifully. It's that
yeah,
practice and language and the different aspects, like even the fact that you are a different person. You can see the world a different way in Russian than you do in English. It's
absolutely.
almost like it has a deeper perspective of the invisible, if you know what I mean.
Yes, no, absolutely, yeah. I love it. Wow. Um, yeah, I never thought of it, but I absolutely agree with you that even taking aside like the language translation, right? The translation from language into language, there are other levels of translation,
Yes.
like our thoughts into language, or even our feelings into thoughts, and then our
Yes.
thoughts into the language that will get the message across, right?
Right.
So, and yes, I agree with you that poetry is like it's like the highest way of, you know, sharing how you think and feel at the same time, but it's also one of the most complicated ones. And I think that poetry
Hmm.
translation is the toughest translation out there.
Yep.
So that's why, developing making a second profile on like theory of poetry translation
Yes.
would be a good move, because a lot of people want to write poetry in several languages, but they really don't know where to start. And for me, I guess it just I never studied. I'll be honest with you, I never really read any books on poetry translation before. I'm
Hmm.
planning to now, since I want to teach other people, but I am a person who learned it through practice. Literally, writing 300 poems was my way of learning
That's
how this
amazing.
translation works.
I
Uh,
I love that approach to learning. It's like you don't learn anything from books. You have your own
yeah,
experience and then you go back to the experts. And I think
yeah,
it's a deeper way of learning.
yeah. That's yeah. This, even though this is not what I intended to write. I was just writing. I never thought it would take me anywhere. It was just because I loved it so much. I kept doing it and doing it for hours a day. Like, yeah. And here I am now doing the podcast. I still can't believe. Oh, wow. I'm so glad.
Yeah,
I'm so
you
glad
have.
to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. And I want to talk a little bit more, I guess, on your influences. You mentioned this Nobel Prize winning
Yeah, Solzhenitsyn.
author. How do you spell his name? Because I don't understand Russian kind of
Sure.
characters.
Solzhenitsyn. I could also.
Okay, perfect. That's for those of you who listening, because I think he has a really inspiring work, and he's such a, like the quote you
Yeah,
said was really
yeah.
great. So I feel like those of you listening might want to look him up and do some research on him. So he's one of them. Is there any more? Can you talk more about just how you were influenced by other people, other writers?
All right, let me. Uh, yeah, like I said, when I started this whole thing, I was influenced by isolation. So it did not start with me getting inspired by a certain poet or a writer. It was
Mm.
just me trying to figure out what I want to do in life, and most importantly, how can I contribute? Because um, if I'm doing something in my life, I want to see results that are not in a way of me accomplishing something, but me contributing to the life of others. Um,
Yes.
and I actually started to read Solzhenitsyn, you know, after I already figured out what I want to do.
Okay, okay.
So for me, it was always first I figure out what I want to do, and then I look for others who do the same.
Yes.
Right?
So
Yeah,
it's an
but
internal search.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Even though like it works differently for different people, right? So I
Hmm.
don't think there is like a one right path, but I just know which one works for me. But I would definitely love to mention Nabokov because he is one of the most famous bilingual
Yes.
writers in the world, and the way he wrote in English is so fascinating to me because I can see his Russian
Ah,
there. Those long sentences, that is so Russian. His writing is full of compound, complicated languages that are not really typical to English.
yes.
And it's his Russian side, 100%. When I
That's
read it, I'm like,
amazing.
this is a Russian type of English writing.
I'm honestly
Yeah.
freaking out. That is such a
Oh yeah.
crazy concept to read his English and like feel the
Yeah.
background
Yeah.
machinery. Like
It's
tell
there.
me tell me more. That's so fascinating. Like did you read his Russian work as well and the English and like both, or did you just read it in English and feel like the background?
Yeah, well, surely I read in both languages, but I wanted to
Amazing.
speak about English because the podcast is in English. And um but yeah, so and that's why I also made a post maybe a couple of weeks ago, maybe more, about this like linguistic shadow that you have in your writing, right? So it's the same, like his Russian sounds a little bit of English nice, I guess. And it's like, yeah, there's a bit of English to it, and same as when he writes in English, there's a little bit of
Mm,
Russian, shadow in there. And the thing is that his style of writing is quite popular, and he was able to establish this uh, writing style because I guess he accepted his, well, I can't say for sure, right, but that's how I
right.
feel. He accepted this Russian shadow in his English, and he just allowed
Yes.
himself, to experiment
To
and
be an
find his own voice
in-betweener.
and style. Yes, absolutely, to be an in-betweener.
Yes, he
And yeah,
did.
And I just love it. And when I read him, I'm like, oh my God, this is, yeah, I
I I
see.
felt the same way reading The Alchemist because
Yeah.
it was translated and I felt a shadow. I mean, I've never heard of the term linguistic shadow, and I want to actually dig deep into that term, but I
Okay.
felt a shadow now that you say that. In reading the book, I felt like the
Mm.
way that the sentence was structured, the word choice, the flow of it was
Yeah.
not English. It had a different presence. It had a different
Yeah.
color added to it, and I couldn't put my finger on it, and it made me wish that I could read it in Portuguese, which is how
Hmm.
Paulo Coelho originally wrote it.
Yeah.
And so the fact that you can read this beautiful work of literature in both these languages and understand it is just one of the most fascinating, beautiful things I've heard.
Yeah.
So you have a term that you call your followers, and it's sweet souls, right?
Yeah, sweet souls. I call my members sweet souls, and there's actually a reason to that. In Russian, there's this word dushinka, and the literal translation is a sweet soul. So on my bilingual page, I call my English members sweet souls and Russian members dushinki. Um, yeah, so there's like a little story behind this term.
That's really beautiful. I didn't know that. I thought it was an English word, but it's amazing to hear that shadow
Yeah.
and that story behind it. And the concept of linguistic shadow, can you tell me more about it? Because I've never really heard of that term.
I think it's same as with an in-betweeners. I just as I speak, I just come up with certain ways of explaining things. So that's how I saw it, you know. It's like a linguistic shadow basically.
Oh,
It's
yes.
there, but you can't really like it's always present. You can't run away from it. You will always have this this shadow following you because it's just a
Yes.
part of you. You
Yes.
just kind of allow it to be there, and you're aware of it, and you just let it be. You're like, this is a part of me, this is a part of my art, this is a part of my action, thoughts, and who I am. And
So
that's
you want to encourage people to embrace their linguistic shadow.
yes, yes, absolutely. Like I said, it can be a strength and it can be your weakness. It will become your weakness if you don't accept it, and it will definitely be a strength that will attract so many people to what you have to say if you embrace it.
That
Yeah.
is beautiful. I think that's a great way to end this podcast. Like, it is such a strong, inspiring message. I want to go right now. And I know that anyone who listened all the way to the end feels so confident and so ready to take on this new in-betweener
Journey. Yes.
personality and journey. Yes.
Yeah.
So my gosh, thank you so much for your beautiful insight. Your terms, the linguistic shadow and in-betweeners are something I'm going to take away and keep for the rest of my life. They're
Yeah.
such strong words.
Oh no, but thank you so much for providing me this opportunity to just share my thoughts. Yeah, it's been great. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.